I was 9 months pregnant, stranded alone on a dark road, and desperately calling for help. My cruel husband and mother-in-law had just left me there, shouting that my problems were my own. Fear gripped me as I waited in the cold night, but nobody knew what was going to happen in the next few hours. My name is Ava, and I'm in my early 30s, living in the suburbs of Houston, Texas. Right now, I'm 9 months pregnant with my first child, and let me tell you, it's been quite a journey. But I want to start at the beginning, before everything changed. I've been married to Greg for 5 years. At first, I thought we had a solid relationship, but as time went on, I realized how much it lacked warmth and respect. Greg is a mid-level manager, always busy with work, and he spends most weekends at his parents' home. It felt like he was prioritizing them over our family. I often found myself alone, managing everything by myself, especially now that I was pregnant. As a freelance graphic designer, I worked from home. It was a dream job, really. I loved expressing my creativity through designs and helping clients bring their visions to life. But in this stage of my life, balancing work and household chores became a juggling act. I was careful about lifting heavy items, and I often relied on my friends for errands like grocery shopping. They were my lifeline during this time, reminding me that I wasn't alone, even when Greg was hardly around. One evening, after a long day of working on a design project, I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Greg walked in. His face was set in a scowl, and I could sense trouble brewing. He dropped his briefcase on the floor and pointed towards the fridge. "Did you get the beer?" he demanded, his voice sharp. I blinked, caught off guard. "I'm sorry, Greg. I was busy working, and..." "Busy with what? You've got all the time in the world." He cut me off, annoyance radiating from him. "Just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you can slack off." I felt my heart sink. I was exhausted, and the last thing I needed was an argument. "I'll go to the store now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Reluctantly, I grabbed my keys and headed to the convenience store. On the way, I tried to push Greg's harsh words out of my mind. As I entered the store, I bumped into my neighbor, Jessica, who was in her late 30s. She had a warm smile that instantly lifted my spirits. "Hey, Ava. You look like you could use a friend," she said, her eyes sparkling with kindness. "I'm just running a quick errand for Greg," I replied, forcing a smile. "You're a saint for putting up with him." "I can't imagine how tough it must be right now," she said, gently touching my arm. "You're almost there, though. Just a little longer." We chatted for a bit, and I left the store feeling slightly better. But as soon as I got home, the weight of Greg's earlier anger came crashing down again. "Why did you take so long?" he snapped as I walked through the door, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "I had to wait in line," I explained, trying to keep my voice calm. "Whatever," he grumbled, snatching the beer from my hand. "You could have called or something. You know, it's hard for me to keep everything together when you don't do your part." I felt my heart racing as he continued to berate me. I wanted to shout back, to defend myself, but instead, I just stood there, silent and hurt. This was becoming a pattern, him lashing out and me taking the blows without a word. The next day, I woke up hoping things would be better, but it was as if Greg had forgotten about the argument altogether. When he left for work, he mentioned, "Don't bother making dinner tonight. I won't be home." But just a few hours later, he returned unexpectedly, his mood dark again. "Where's dinner?" he barked as he walked in, his eyes narrowing at me. "I thought you weren't coming home," I said, my voice trembling. "Of course I come home. You should have anticipated that," he shouted, his frustration boiling over. "You never think ahead. You need to do better." My heart felt heavy in my chest as he continued. "Maybe if you took some notes from my mother, I wouldn't have to remind you of your responsibilities. She's a real wife." Martha, I thought, cringing at the mention of his mother. She had never liked me, always finding fault in everything I did. Ever since our wedding, she had blamed me for any issues that arose with Greg, believing I wasn't fulfilling my duties as a wife. I could feel the tears welling up, but I fought them back. "Greg, please," I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm doing my best." But he was already storming out of the house, heading to his parents' place, leaving me feeling isolated and hurt. Each argument chipped away at me, leaving a scar that felt deeper every time. As the days passed, I could feel the tension between us growing. Greg insisted that I join him on a family trip with his parents, despite my due date looming closer. I was hesitant, but he didn't give me much choice. On the day of the trip, I felt a mix of anxiety and dread. As I sat in the car, taking deep breaths to calm myself, something shifted inside me. I felt a sudden warmth and then panic. My water broke. "Greg," I cried, looking at him in disbelief. "My water just broke." He glanced at me, his expression hardening. "We can't ruin this trip. Get out of the car, Ava. You're ruining everything."
What?
"No. I need to go to the hospital," I shouted, desperation creeping into my voice. "Just go by yourself. We can't have this mess in the car." Martha chimed in, her voice cold and unyielding. They both ordered me to leave, as if I were a nuisance, an inconvenience in their perfect plans. Left there, alone and terrified, I felt the weight of their cruelty crashing down on me. In that moment, I realized I was truly on my own. As I sat in the car, my heart raced, and panic washed over me. I couldn't believe what was happening. My water had broken, and instead of support, I faced anger and dismissal from Greg and Martha. "I'm not going anywhere," I yelled, feeling the urgency of the moment. "I need to get to the hospital." But Greg just stared at me, his expression hard and unyielding. "We're not taking you. You'll ruin our trip," he said flatly, and with that, he and his mother turned away, leaving me in disbelief. Desperation clawed at my throat as I watched them, my emotions a chaotic swirl of fear and anger. It was as if I was invisible to them, a mere inconvenience in their lives. I scrambled to find my phone, my hands shaking as I dialed Jessica's number. She had always been there for me, and I hoped she would come through again. "Jessica, please. My water just broke, and I need help. Greg and his mother won't take me to the hospital." My voice trembled, and I could hear the urgency in my own words. "Stay right there, Ava. I'm on my way," she replied, her tone steady and reassuring. I hung up and took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. It felt like an eternity, but soon I saw Jessica's car pull into the driveway. She rushed out, her face a mixture of concern and determination. "I'm here. Let's get you to the hospital," she said, helping me out of the car and guiding me carefully to her vehicle. As we drove, I felt the reality of the situation crashing over me. The pain was beginning to set in, and with each contraction, I gripped the seat, trying to breathe through the waves of discomfort. Jessica kept glancing at me, concern etched on her face. "You're doing great, Ava. Just focus on breathing," she encouraged, her voice calming. When we finally arrived at the hospital, a flurry of nurses rushed to my side. They took charge, wheeling me into the delivery room, and I was grateful for their efficiency. Jessica stayed close, holding my hand as I prepared to bring my baby into the world. "Everything is going to be okay," she whispered, her presence a lifeline in that moment of chaos. As the contractions intensified, I felt a surge of fear mixed with excitement. I was about to become a mother, but the uncertainty of what awaited me afterward loomed large. After hours of labor, I finally heard the sweet sound of my baby crying. Relief washed over me as the nurse handed my child to me. Tears streamed down my face as I looked into the tiny face of my newborn. "You're here," I whispered, my heart swelling with love. Jessica took a step back, giving me a moment to bond with my baby. She smiled, her eyes shining with joy for me. "You did it, Ava. You're a mom," she exclaimed, and I could feel the warmth of her support wrapping around me. Once I was settled in my hospital room, Jessica contacted my parents. They arrived shortly, worry etched on their faces. "How are you, sweetheart?" my mother asked, enveloping me in a warm hug. "I'm okay now. Just glad it's over," I replied, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and elation. But as I held my baby, I couldn't shake the feeling of anger and betrayal that coursed through me. Greg had abandoned me when I needed him most. How could he choose a trip over his wife and child? I felt a burning desire for justice, for something to change. After a couple of days in the hospital, I was finally discharged. As I prepared to leave, I felt a wave of determination wash over me. I was done being the passive victim in my own life. I needed to reclaim my power. Jessica visited me at home, bringing along a gift for the baby, a soft blanket and a small stuffed animal. "I know things have been rough, but you're stronger than you think, Ava," she said, her eyes serious. "You deserve happiness, and I'll help you however I can." I looked at her, grateful for her unwavering support. "Thank you, Jessica. I really appreciate everything," I said, feeling a flicker of hope ignite within me. As the days turned into weeks, I began to plot my next steps. I reached out to a lawyer to discuss my options regarding divorce. The thought of facing Greg again made my stomach churn, but I knew I had to do it. I was ready to fight for my independence, to reclaim my life and ensure my child had a better future. One evening, I sat down with Jessica, and we began to discuss a plan. "I want to make sure Greg faces the consequences for what he did," I confessed, my voice steady. Jessica nodded. "We'll make sure he doesn't get away with it, Ava. You're not alone in this." In that moment, I realized that I had the strength to move forward, to seek the justice I deserved. I was ready to take control of my life, no matter the challenges ahead. With each passing day, I felt more determined to take back my life. The anger and pain from Greg's betrayal fueled my resolve to seek justice. I sat down with Jessica and my lawyer, Rebecca, to discuss my options. It was time to file for divorce and ensure Greg faced the consequences for how he treated me. Rebecca laid out the steps clearly. "Ava, we will start by filing the necessary paperwork. Given the circumstances, especially the way Greg abandoned you during your pregnancy, you have a strong case for custody of your child," she explained, her tone professional yet empathetic. I nodded, feeling a mix of fear and empowerment. I just want what's best for my baby. I don't want Greg in our lives, if he's going to treat us like that. Jessica chimed in. "You deserve to be happy, Ava. You've already shown so much strength. We'll be with you every step of the way." Her support meant everything to me. I wasn't alone in this fight. As we moved forward, I couldn't shake the anxiety that crept in every time I thought about facing Greg again. What would he say? Would he try to manipulate me again? I steeled myself for the confrontation, knowing it was necessary for my future. A few days later, I received a call from Rebecca informing me that the court date had been set. My stomach twisted in knots as the date approached. On the morning of the hearing, I dressed in a simple but professional outfit, determined to present myself with dignity. As I looked in the mirror, I took a deep breath. I had to stay strong for my baby. Jessica drove me to the courthouse, her presence a comforting balm. "You've got this, Ava. Just remember to speak from your heart," she encouraged. When we arrived, I was met with a sense of foreboding. The courthouse felt cold and unwelcoming. I could see Greg sitting in the waiting area, his expression unreadable. He looked up as I entered, and a chill ran down my spine. I quickly averted my gaze, focusing on the path ahead. The hearing began, and I felt the tension in the room. As Rebecca presented my case, I could see Greg's face contort with anger. He tried to counter every point, but I felt a surge of confidence. I was not the helpless woman he had treated me as. "Your Honor," I finally spoke, my voice steady but emotional. "I just want to provide a safe and loving environment for my child. Greg's behavior during my pregnancy showed that he is not prepared to be a supportive father." Greg shot me a glare, but I didn't waver. This was my moment to reclaim my power. As the judge deliberated, I could feel the weight of my decision pressing down on me. Would they see the truth? Would I get the chance to build a better life for my child? Finally, the judge returned. "Based on the evidence presented and the circumstances surrounding this case, I grant Ava full custody of the child." My heart soared, and tears of relief filled my eyes. Greg's face twisted in anger as he realized what had happened. "You can't do this," he shouted, but the judge raised a hand to silence him. "You will have scheduled visitation rights, but it will be supervised for the time being," the judge replied firmly. As we left the courthouse, I felt lighter. It was just the beginning, but I knew I had taken the first crucial step toward freedom. I looked at Jessica, who beamed with pride. "You did it, Ava. You stood up for yourself. Thank you for being here, I said, my voice filled with gratitude. This was a turning point for me. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor. With each step forward, I felt stronger and more empowered to face whatever came next. After the court hearing, I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but I also knew this was just the beginning of a long journey. With full custody granted, my focus shifted to creating a safe and loving home for my baby. I was determined to be the mother my child deserved, one who would provide unconditional love and support. As the weeks went by, I slowly settled into my new routine as a single mother. I named my baby Mia, a name that felt as beautiful and strong as I hoped she would grow to be. Every coo and smile from her filled my heart with joy and purpose. Jessica was always there, supporting me as I navigated the challenges of motherhood. She became a part of our little family, and her son, Max, often visited, bringing laughter and warmth to our home. Despite the happiness, I couldn't shake the lingering shadow of Greg. He had been served divorce papers, and I knew he was furious. His temper had always scared me, and the idea of him trying to interfere in our lives was unsettling. I prepared myself for the inevitable confrontation, reminding myself that I had the strength to face whatever came my way. One evening, as I was putting Mia to bed, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was an unknown number, but my gut told me it was Greg. I hesitated, my heart pounding. Finally, I answered, steeling myself for his words. "Ava," he said, his voice laced with anger. "You think you can just take my daughter away from me? This isn't over." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Greg, this is about Mia's well-being. You need to understand that your behavior has consequences. You have to prove that you can be a responsible father. You'll regret this. I will fight you every step of the way," he snapped. "I'm not afraid of you anymore, Greg," I replied, feeling empowered by my own words. "I won't let you bully me into submission. This is my life and Mia's. You need to respect that." After hanging up, I felt a mix of fear and strength. I realized that I was finally standing up for myself. I didn't have to let Greg's threats control me. With each passing day, I grew more confident in my ability to protect my daughter. Meanwhile, the story of my struggles gained traction online. One of Jessica's influential friends shared my experience, drawing attention to the realities of emotional abuse and the strength it takes to break free. The support from the community flooded in, and I was surprised by the number of people who reached out, sharing their own stories of resilience. Months passed, and Greg continued to attempt to assert his presence in Mia's life, but each time, he faced the legal boundaries I had established. The supervised visits kept him in check, and I made sure to document everything. With Jessica's help, I felt ready for anything he might throw my way. One day, I received a letter from Greg's attorney, indicating he wanted to negotiate a more favorable arrangement regarding visitation. I braced myself for another round of conflict, but I was prepared. I had built a support system, and I knew I wasn't alone. The moment I stepped into the meeting room with my lawyer, I felt a wave of strength wash over me. "I'm ready for this," I thought, glancing at Jessica, who gave me an encouraging nod. In that moment, I understood that my journey was more than just about seeking justice. It was about reclaiming my life and my power. I was no longer a victim of my circumstances. I was Ava, a mother, a survivor, and a woman determined to forge a brighter future for my daughter. As I walked out of that meeting, I felt an overwhelming sense of hope. I was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that my past would not define me. I had risen from the ashes of my struggles, and I was finally in control of my own story.